That was a pleasure to do this interview with you, and I'm always fascinated about you, not only as an artist, but as a human being. And for me, it's really fascinating to see that the way you are in real life, that's what we hear in your music. Do you have anything to say about that?
Maybe the way we behave and what we do professionally, maybe it does reflect, especially when you're a musician. Maybe it does show who you are inside. I would like to believe that, because music is something that we have to be so honest about. There is nothing to hide. If you are hiding something, it does come through.
Absolutely.
In the performance. And as I always said many, many, many times, when people say all these wonderful things to me, my answer is only one, and I always keep saying it until I guess people are bored to tears. They think it's boring. For me, the music is the composer. And obviously, of course, the composer has to have an instrument to perform the composition. But where would we be without the composer? So I think, really, in reality, the greatest genius is the composer, and it's the most difficult thing to achieve, to please the composer.
I see, it's very interesting, because since I've known you, I'm constantly fascinated with your personality and your views of life, and you're such a positive and happy person, and you can be so joyful and funny, but it's always very, very impressive for me to see that when you take your violin and you play, there is such a reverence for what you do. And the experience for the people that hear you is just very spiritual, because there is such no-nonsense kind of an attitude, such a serious and honest kind of, we can feel that reverence that you feel for the composers.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I'm trying to project that, because, as I always say, my greatest respect and admiration, and as I call, this is the expression, they are awesome. That's what I borrowed from the Americans. The composers are awesome, because everything, in a sense, is an imitation. The whole of life, whatever we do, say art, if we think in terms of literature, it's copying life. Every expression, every description, it's an imitation of something, except the note. That note that comes from the spirit of the composer is unique, and just one, because you cannot copy it. It comes from the composer, and that's where it stays. I'm not talking about plagiarism or something like that. Of course, that's something else. But the actual composition becomes the sole creation of the composer. And this is what I find so fascinating every time, and so moving.
When you look at your life, when you look back, and you see where you are today, how do you feel?
I don't, quite honestly, to be very, very honest, I don't think about myself at all. In other words, it's not what I achieved. It's not what I accomplished. I believe that my life has not changed all that much from days gone by. The only thing that I pursue is to improve, and the excellence of the actual playing, and the excellence of trying to reach the level of the composers that I'm performing. I believe that's probably the most difficult thing to do. If we think in terms of contemporary composers, well, then I can go to a contemporary composer, play to him or to her, with a few exceptions, and say, is this exactly what you wanted? So I have an answer. How do I talk to Beethoven or Brahms or Bach to ask him or them what is the right interpretation? It's almost always guessing. Of course, the score we have in front of us, so we are trying probably to fit what we see in the score, but we really have no answer. It's just intuition.
When you you've gone through almost all the repertoire for the violin, and when you take a piece that you played, let's say in your 20s, and you play it now, you know, how do you approach the same piece after so many years?
Very interesting question, and very valuable, because I would say that we never stop learning. In other words, something that I had played 1,000 times, every time I take that score and I look at it, I find new information. It's a never-ending source of education. So, totally inexhaustible. It means that these were the greatest geniuses. We are just a tool that we are trying to satisfy the composition. But for me, I don't want to repeat myself again and again, the same thing is always non-stop, that when I take my violin and I look into a score, I said, my God, I missed this yesterday. I didn't see yesterday what it really means. And it's a never-ending source of education. So I say, who were these people? Amazing, simply amazing.
I see such a degree of humility, really. I've watched you rehearse with your collaborators, with Misha and others. And I was really very touched to see how sensitive and how tactful and how humble you are, you know, when it comes to music. And when you never impose your things, you just suggest things that you feel that are important. And it's a quality that not many artists today have. There's no arrogance, you know, that's what I feel.
Well, I have to, it's a very easy answer, because I would not condescend. I don't want to use that word because it's maybe not appropriate. But I do choose my collaborators. And if I don't respect them to the highest degree, I wouldn't perform with them. So that's the first issue for me, to find a collaborator that I trust and I respect and I listen to what they are doing and I'm capable, which I think I'm paying this compliment to myself. If I see that the interpretation of that performer, my partner, is saying something different and more profound than I saw it, I'm fully prepared to change my concept very quickly. But I have to be convinced that this is so. And very often, as I said, I'm very lucky because I do choose the most talented people to perform with. So that's the answer.
I also feel that you are so secure and so comfortable with yourself that you have no fears of like discovering new things. You know, you never say, you know, I play this and this is it. You know, you always find ways of looking, like you say, at the score and finding and discovering new things, which I don't think is the case really with a lot of the younger performers. You know, it's not the same attitude.
You are absolutely right. You use the right terminology to say, and I'm going to be quite arrogant, because it's all about being truthful. Yes, I am secure. if I wouldn't feel secure when I pick up that violin, that I know I can play the violin quite well, and I know what I'm about to do on that violin, consulting the composer and the score in front of me, I wouldn't do it. So your description that I am secure, yes, I have to acknowledge that, otherwise I wouldn't lower myself by playing and not being secure. I don't believe in it. It's really true, I've heard some musicians, specifically violinists, when it really sounded very insecure, and I'm not comfortable with that. If you don't know the piece, if you are not master of your instrument, don't do it.
I also feel that a lot of the younger artists, not only violinists, pianists, cellists, they are really not that careful when it comes to reading the score. They really are not reading between the lines. Sometimes they imitate others, or they just play. They practice with that. A lot of people, I feel, don't use their intelligence and their ears. Very, very few people today really know how to listen and how important every detail on the music is. And this is my experience, knowing you and talking about music is just so magnificent, because I see how you pay attention to every note, every detail, everything is important for you. And I don't hear that in most of the performances.
Well, maybe there are several answers to that. But the one that is very important is there are two things, and I don't have to tell you because you yourself are such a marvelous teacher and you a musician, everything. So I don't have to tell you, but I'm saying it to the world. There are two things that are extremely important in rendering a piece of music. To be able to hear yourself so objectively,
Yes.
as if you would be listening to somebody in a distance and a total stranger. How to use your hearing aid here, I'm going to call it that, and to be able to analyze what you yourself are doing on that instrument. That's what some are not capable of achieving. It's not only to be critical of someone else, be critical just in the same way of yourself and the capacity of hearing what you are doing. Maybe it's because you are very close, so you are not capable of such observation, but it's terribly important, because don't mislead yourself. You think maybe you are doing everything so wonderfully well, maybe it's not so. So the question is, when you play something, the experiment, take a recording or a tape and listen to yourself. Do you trust that tape 100% that it's really what you have done? That's a question, because you have a microphone, you have acoustics, there's so many issues. And also, when you have a violin next to your ear, maybe with the piano is a little different. Is it? There is more distance.
Yes, yes.
More distance. So the distance helps you in a sense. With the fiddle, it's right under your ear. So maybe sometimes you are even misled by what you hear. It's too close to be able to judge.
How relevant do you think? Because when you look at your life, you really developed by just being surrounded by the most incredible musicians, and you collaborated with the most fantastic conductors. But you really had very little training when it comes to teachers. I mean, you didn't have a rigorous kind of education, when it comes to the violin. And there is such freshness, till today. You pick up the violin, it just sounds like fresh as a flower. How relevant is really a very rigorous education with one teacher? I wonder.
You know, something very interesting just happened. My very, very first teacher was alive, the one who taught me. Her name was, I have to use the past tense, because she just passed away. Her name was Esther Greenbaum, and she was my very first teacher in Poland. A wonderful, wonderful old lady. Well, I would say that I should be very grateful to this lady because she did not hamper me and she did not impose when I was a child. I met her when I was about 5 years of age, and she was trying to teach me to play the violin. I already played on my own, but she was my very first teacher, and she gave me the freedom to play the way I did. She did not impose, even with the posture and the position. Yes, because you know I was holding my bow with my fingers any which way. I didn't know. So she set the standard, if I were to say that. She positioned my fingers, my little tiny, even smaller than it is now, when I was 5 years of age, in the same way that I'm holding the bow until this day, which is amazing. Nothing changed. So she was so intelligent and so talented to realize that this was the position that I should hold the bow, which was at the same time firm but free.
And what happened when you went to Carl Flesch? What did he do with you in terms of the actual playing of the violin, or he didn't touch anything?
He didn't. I mean, as far as the actual violin playing, I played everything when I went to study with him. Already all the most difficult. I played Kreutzer Sonata when I was about 7 years of age. So he only corrected some of my interpretation, but the actual position and the actual violin playing, he did not. He left me completely alone. Probably he felt that what I was doing was the correct way of playing the violin.
And when you had to learn a concerto or any piece in the repertoire, and you were very young, how did you approach the score?
I cheated.
No, no, but, no, but once you didn't cheat, you know, when you were reading and everything, you know, like when you were on top of everything.
Well, I did cheat because nobody really, they assumed, most of the teachers, including Carl Flesch, assumed that I was taught how to read notes. I did not know until late in my life, I was still a child, not an adult, that one needed to count. And I failed sometimes because I didn't know what it all meant. Owing to the fact that I played so well, and I probably learned by listening to other people, so I memorized everything. But I didn't know how to read music.
I wanted to ask you a question because many times I went to performances where I just didn't like the performer. And he was a serious musician, but the music did not reach me. And then I would ask some colleagues, you know, what did you think of that performance? And then they would say, oh, I respect him very much because he has a sense of architecture. And my response was I always said, you know, we are not architects or engineers, you know, music is about the soul, music is about emotion, you know. If you are just aware of the architecture, you know, then you lose sight of the real meaning of music. Of course, the architecture of the music has to be there, you know. But they intellectualize sometimes too much when music has to be more spontaneous.
That's something different. I mean, so you have to have the gift to recognize when you have to treat it like a monument or physics or a building, and when to put your soul into it. So the notes are giving you all of that information. You are either moved, and then you try to express by what you are moved, or you're not moved. If you don't have that spirit and the soul to be moved by music, forget it.
The whole purpose is lost.
Yes, yes, defeat it, then become a dressmaker or a shoemaker.
And I think that that's one of the problems why a lot of classical musicians don't reach the younger generation, because it becomes something too, not emotional enough, it becomes something too academic.
Yes, intellectual.
Intellectual, and then the young people are not interested. Don't relate, and they feel bored. But yet, you know, in my experience was that when you have an artist that really communicates, is a communicator, it doesn't matter what they play, everybody's touched. That's really that's why classical music is where it is today. That there are not enough communicators.
Yes, of course.
That's the problem.
Absolutely, but music is all emotion. Exactly. If you don't feel it, if it's dry like a stick, then forget it. Then it's not music. It's only just something that you learn, like everything, like a craft. Music is art. It's not a craft. That's the difference. So then you have to relate to it in the same way. It has to move you, unless there is something that now, of course, we are faced with a different world. Some of the composers are composing things in a different way completely. So it's really not appealing to the emotions.
And that's why people are not that interested, you know. I mean, contemporary music it's interesting, but it's not that appealing for the masses.
It's intellectual, it's not emotional.
Yeah. It's like a scientific study.
Yes.
It becomes like that.
A machine.
A machine.
Yeah. A machine.
Yeah.
But even the machine can be interesting sometimes.
Exactly.
Because rhythm.
Yes.
What is the, this is what I discuss very often. As you well know, as everybody knows, I don't teach. Not willingly. Under pressure. And I don't call it teaching, I call it sharing my experience and my knowledge and my opinion, etc., etc. But I keep saying, what is the first thing I asked sometimes some of the young students, what is the first thing you are looking for when you take a piece of music? Oh, they say, I don't know. Is it just to express something? I said, no. It's how much is what's in the bar, to count.
Exactly.
Rhythm, which is lost these days.
Totally.
That's the most fascinating,
yeah.
intricate. Rhythm is the foundation of everything. When we walk, we have to have rhythm. When we speak, we have to have rhythm. We have to know when to stop speaking. There are some speakers on the stage who never know when to end it.
Exactly.
And then people are falling asleep and they want to scream. So rhythm and timing.
Absolutely.
Timing is of such great importance. But can you teach it? That's my question.
I think you can teach it. I think you can teach it, but I think that the most, I'm not saying all the teachers, but most of the teaching that I see today, they don't stress that enough. That's why when I discovered the videos of Giselle Brodsky, I was just so fascinated, because that man just put such an emphasis on every little detail. When he rehearses with an orchestra, oh my God, it's just so clear. And I don't think that's what teachers today should do. But what happens, kids go to conservatories and the teachers are too busy with their own careers. And most of these kids, I'm not saying all of them, they prepare for competitions and everything by themselves, and they don't have the culture, and they don't have the knowledge to do all those things, I wish we had more teachers, more people like Giselle Brodsky, more people like, that's why even if you do not teach the violin, when you talk about music, you approach it like a language and it makes sense.
Well, my answer is that he was absolutely one of a kind. There is no doubt about it that he was unique. I had never met anyone before I met him of the caliber. No, afterwards, with all due respect to some of the very, very great musicians that I played with, you know, and I did have some marvelous conductors, but that kind of almost mystical level, you know, he was a Buddhist,
Yes, of
and
course.
he applied everything that goes on in life to music. He thought that was all one package, and I believe it's true, because it does relate to everything.
It was very interesting to see that he wanted to work actually with groups that were not really that professional.
Yes.
Or there's a DVD where he rehearses for a requiem with an unprofessional chorus, you know. And it's just so miraculous.
The Foray Requiem?
The Foray Requiem, which is unbelievable. And then it's incredible.
Unforgettable.
And these people that are not even professionals get the message.
Yes, yes. Well, that's the idea.
They get the message, or he gets a group of kids that are not really that fantastic, and at the end of the day, they play with such a level.
Well, you see,
Because it's so clear. It's actually very simple. And you
Yes,
know,
you're
and,
so right.
and then your ideas, the way you approach music, or the way he approached music, they are very concrete and simple ideas. You know, it's really like reading really what's on the screen, interpreting what's there to the greatest detail, not just giving images. You know, play this with a lot of feeling, or play this with imagination, or play this, you know, with a sad kind of a mood. And I always ask myself when I go to master classes, what does that mean?
yes.
Be mystical or be sad. What does that mean? It means nothing. Because that's not concrete information.
But how do you teach that? This is what we keep saying, that
It's
you
a lot
can
of
teach
work.
everything except talent.
But it's not teaching. It's really having somebody very, very, very gifted, and just making that
There
person
you
aware.
are.
But you just make them more aware.
There you are. You just
Exactly.
mentioned the
Yes.
most important thing, the talent.
And a good teacher takes that talent and makes
Yes.
them more aware, so that the talented artist
Right.
just keeps
Right.
searching on his own.
Exactly. So as we say, it takes two to tango.
Yes.
You have to have the student who has the talent in the first place, and you have to have the very wonderful teacher to develop it and not to destroy it, to know, because there are some teachers who are so self-centered that they think that's the only way, and they don't want to respect somebody else's approach. But as I said, for me, it was never a problem. Only not too long ago, somebody came to me and said, how to play this, how to interpret it. So this person said, well, I don't know. I don't know. I want you to tell me. I said, you already have the best teacher. So this person said, oh, you mean you? I said, oh no. Oh no, I don't mean me. I mean the score. It's right in front of you. That's the best teacher. Try to be as faithful as you can to the score, with a little bit of your own spirit, obviously. You have to add something. You know, notes are just notes, but you have to understand the notes.
And not
easy.
play and practice by repetition, but be creative in what you do at all times. You know, just search for that. You know, and that's, you know, what we hear in your music. You know, and in your last appearance in the National Gallery, it was, for me, it was. I mean, it brought me to tears, because to see you in front of, first of all, you are so gracious and warm and embracing to your audience.
Thank you so much.
And then you take that violin, and I mean, not 1 year went by. You know, you play the same way you played probably when you were 15. How is that possible? How many people reach at this stage of life and they take the violin and it feels as natural as a conversation? This is what we feel when you take the violin. And that's why everybody is moved. And you do not hear that today.
You know, I don't know how to answer that. I'm not particularly religious, but I believe in a certain power that we are given when we are born, and maybe there is a lot more to it than we know. Life will always be a mystery, unsolved mystery, life and the demise of it. So I don't know how to answer that, but I think that we are born with a gift, each one of us in a different way, doing different things, which cannot be explained, and it comes from maybe heaven or from God.
Do you find sometimes that you play a concert, and of course when you're playing, when you're in the act of playing and producing this concert, you are totally involved in what you are doing, but then do you find that sometimes you take a step back and you look at the performance and you say, oh my God, I didn't realize I did that, or you are astonished at what you have achieved and not knowing how?
I would interpret it differently. I would say, oh my God, I didn't know it sounded like that. Because to be totally frank, I'm aware of every draw of the bow that I make. Everything is done consciously, not subconsciously. Maybe people don't realize it because they think it's so spontaneous. In a sense it is. The playing is spontaneous, but I think it over what I'm doing with the help of the composer. So as I always say, my greatest respect is for the composer, and I'm trying to fit everything into it. But I listen to myself, which is, as I already said, the greatest feat, to listen and hear what you are doing and whether it really fits the composition. But as I said before, I study that music, I'm looking at the score, and that's all we can do. What more can we do than to respect the score and the composition to the best of our ability?
Going back now to the program that you played and that is going to be released and is really being released in this DVD, when you decided to do the Schumann Sonata and the Unesco Sonata, and you had your date with the score, how did you feel when you reapproached that repertoire?
Like a newborn, as if I had never played it before. It's the road of discovery every single time. Yesterday, I discovered new things in the score, which I missed yesterday. This is why I keep repeating, who were these geniuses that were constantly learning from them? But this is the excitement about it. The actual rediscovery of everything that you had done before, and never ending supply of inspiration and information. And that's what is so fascinating for me. The composer and the composition never ends.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you feel about Schumann? How do you feel about this masterpiece that you performed?
Yes, I can. I played Schumann years and years ago and enjoyed it very much. Then I left it. All of a sudden comes a young man who plays the piano a lot better than many. Actually, really a fantastic young man. And his name is Misha. I wonder if I should give out his full name. Misha Dacic. Would that be appropriate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, he's on the DVD with you. No problem.
That Misha Dacic comes to me, and we speak sometimes Russian, and he happens to have many other qualities except playing piano. He is good looking, he's charming, he's intelligent, he's lovely. I mean, I have nothing but praise, which is really not right. Not right. I mean, He will really be very conceited after this. Anyway, but he deserves it. And he says to me, in Russian I think it was, Idechka, did you ever play the Schumann Sonata? I said, yes. I dismissed it. How about playing it with me right now? I said, okay. And that was it.
That was the beginning of the journey.
Incredible. All of a sudden, the whole tragedy of that composer like appeared in front of my eyes. I realized with that kind of, how can I describe the Schumann, this particular sonata, if you don't really try to analyze what's going on? Oh, maybe it's a little bit superficial. You know, the few chords, and it's always, you know, moving. I mean, there is no real stopping that emotion. So he starts this, my God, it is, I came to the realization that it's full of hopeless tragedy, which he was trying to maybe erase or trying to comfort himself somehow. But I came to this realization that it is so tragic. From the first note, even the first chords, the drama of it, and that human being is impregnated with all of that. And I can't even describe how it moves me. Every time I pick up that violin and I try to play it, and it's never enough. That's how I feel about it now.
It's a piece that really, the more you hear it, the more you love it. It's unbelievable. It's very addictive. And all those themes, you know, they stay in your mind.
It's a kind of, I don't know what to call it. I'm not sure that it's love. It's much more profound than that. Yeah. It's hypnotic. I'm hypnotized by it. And I can play it 1,000 times and I feel the same emotion. Never changes.
And how do you see the transition from movement to movement? How would you describe the journey?
Same way. It continues. Mm-hmm. It's a different mood. It's not a different experience. The mood is different, of course, but the actual depth of it doesn't change. Even in the fast passages, I feel the tragedy of it. Maybe it's me. I don't know. Maybe maybe it's not real.
No, it's really quite real.
Okay. Then you confirm what I feel. Yeah. That this man was saturated with all of that. But he was still trying to compose, to be a composer. He had to put it on paper. But what went on in his spirit and soul, very tragic. That's what I feel. And that's how I try to play it, to present it to the nation.
Why do you think that Schumann is such a difficult composer to get through, you know, to play? A lot of people are really quite afraid of
I'm
Schumann.
not sure that it's difficult. I don't see it that way. I think every composer has his or her difficulties. It's always difficult. But I'm not sure that Schumann, I would say Mozart was more difficult than Schumann. How do you express Mozart? It's an enigma.
Yeah, because it's more simple, it's more difficult.
It's fragile.
It's very
How do you transfer that fragility to the people? And yet, I mean, all his compositions, his symphonies are tragic. Mozart, and everybody thought he was so light and transparent. Wrong. There is the answer.
Then going to the second sonata that you performed in this concert, what can you tell us about the Unesco Sonata?
I had the privilege to study with Unesco, of course. Tremendous luck. I would say that I was privileged, except for some other very wonderful conductors, but my greatest learning experience was with the two. One was, of course, Sergiu Celibidache, who, to my eternal surprise, I will never get over it. When I played with Celibidache, sorry to go back,
No, it's fine.
to reverse that, not one time did he ever make a comment about my interpretation. He never said, Ida, why don't you play it this way? Which now I'm more surprised than ever. Everything I did, he accepted and collaborated with me, as if I had been that guru, which is really not true. But he followed.
Yeah.
But he did say one thing to me. When I played with him and I was about 18, he said, well, that Brahms concerto, which you play so, of course, wonderfully, because he recorded with me. He actually went into a recording studio against all his instincts. He hated to do anything in a recording studio, but he did it with me. And that's what he said to me, which I'll never forget. Ida, when you get to be 40, you'll play it differently.
He said that.
Yeah. And it's truth. That's what it is.
Well, you should play differently because your life experiences are totally different than your
But
own.
he accepted my
But he
interpretation
accepted.
then.
Incredible. I wonder what he
Really thought.
what he saw. You know, he must have been marveled by you. He must have been totally.
I think he probably
really
liked
taken.
my playing, yes.
Because you play very much the way he preaches. It's the same philosophy. It's the same approach to music. That's why there was a mutual understanding, because you both instinctively you viewed music the same way.
My way was very instinctive. I didn't know what I was doing, and he emphasized it. You play it this way, you don't know what you're doing, but it's probably correct, by instinct. So that's it. I was guided by the music. I mean, actually, maybe that's all we need.
I was just going to talk to you about that. You know, what do you do with a truly gifted musician that follows the instinct? You know, that means that artist has a vision already. You know, doesn't need to be taught by anybody. He just feels the music that way. Maybe that's who you, that's who
but
you
the
were.
composer, the composition indicates it.
Yeah.
This is how we learn. And if we have the gift to grasp it, that's from God. If we have the gift to understand what we are looking at and listening to, is this teachable? Up to a point, maybe?
Well, to the very gifted, the very gifted has a prodigy has a vision, sees those things, you know.
So it's the talent.
And but I still believe that if you have gifted people that are not geniuses, and you have really teachers like you or actually Bidaki, you can teach, you can guide that talented person that can become also great artists. Because many times, you know, the prodigies, those kids that have this vision, they get lost because sometimes they need also a little bit of guidance.
Absolutely.
So they can see more.
Absolutely.
And that's why we constantly lose.
Yes.
And then these kids that are, you're amazed when they're 11, 12, 13 years old, when they're 18 and 19.
Yes, yes. So
they're
they
not
are
interesting anymore.
Yes.
They are bored because the environment around them doesn't stimulate them enough to keep searching. You know, this
That's
is what
something
happens.
else again, if you're not lucky.
Yeah.
I was lucky. Very
Lucky,
lucky.
because you had an understanding family, and then
My father.
Exactly.
My father, who was an artist painter, understood not only music, but every note, which is absolutely beyond my comprehension until this day. A man who never learned. So that tells you something.
So
that
he was in
from God.
Exactly.
It's
Maybe he had this inborn talent that was not developed.
How do you explain that?
Of course.
He was frustrated because he knew how to read a score a little bit, but not properly.
But his instinct was right.
Every time I tried to trap him, I deliberately played something to him, you know, by one of those great composers, Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, and I said, Daddy, I want to play you two versions of it. Which do you think is the correct one? This or this? Didn't hesitate for a second, like a bomb. That one. That's correct.
He knew.
So it was, without fail.
Let's
So-
go back to the Unesco Sonata because we deviated a little bit.
Yes.
So what can you tell us about that piece?
Well, as I started to say, I was the lucky one because I met Enesco when I was a child, and this was just before the war. So my father took me to Paris and brought me in front of Georges Enesco, and I played to him. And I'll never forget the question that he asked me. And it was not his composition, but I played Bach Chaconne to him that time. And he said, did you study it with me? I said, no, maître. And that was that. He didn't say anything.
Nothing.
No.
So what happened when you were looking at the score of the sonata that you performed?
By Georges Enesco?
Yes.
I didn't quite understand it at that time. I just played it like everything else, but I'm learning it now.
Do you see it differently now?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I didn't see the personality of that music, which was Unesco. And I have to say something, and maybe, I hope he will forgive me, wherever he is. He wanted to escape that, I don't want to say stigma, because it's not a stigma to be Romanian. But he was, I think, a little bit afraid of it, that he might be accused of being gitano, as we say in Spanish. Gitanito, which I love, by the way. But I think he was a little bit afraid of it. He wanted to be terribly, terribly classical. He did not achieve it in his composition.
Because he's so free.
The sonata is totally gitano. And I'm sorry to say, my dear maître, because that's what they called him. He called me Mademoiselle Haendel. When I was about 8, 9 years of age, he called me Mademoiselle Haendel, and I called him maître. So I'm going to say maître. I'm afraid it's very gypsy, that sonata, and that's how I play it.
That's how
And
you
which
play
is phenomenal. It tears you apart. So be happy with it.
It's so interesting to see the score of Enesco's music because it's so full of so much detail. It's unbelievable how
Yes,
he
yes.
he actually writes in the score
Right,
everything
right.
he wants, every bar, every
Right,
note,
right,
every
right.
nuance, you know.
Amazing.
And it's interesting because if you follow his directions, at the end of the day, you feel very free.
Yes. So true.
It sounds free.
Yes.
With so many
absolutely true.
instructions, you know, left, right, here, there, you know, there are so many instructions in the learning process of
Yes,
the piece.
yes.
But and yet when you perform it, it's just like it was written in the spur of a moment.
Yes,
It's very
yes,
interesting.
yes, yes. Fascinating. Absolutely 100% correct. And this is what I find so spellbinding because it's very close to my heart. This is actually who I am. When I play it with Misha,
Of course.
who is who he is, we are a team.
Yeah.
That's how I feel it, that's how he feels it. Which
Actually,
is
when
fantastic.
you performed at the National Gallery and I was listening to both of you, I said this is very difficult to match what you both do
A
in
team.
that. What you both do in that sonata, it's very difficult to match. I think that very few people have achieved that kind of
Convincing.
understanding. Yeah,
Totally
understanding.
convincing.
Both of you.
Yes, I agree.
It sounds like one amazing thing.
Yes,
you know.
absolutely.
And it's so difficult, both for
Oh.
the violin and for the piano.
Very, varied. For the piano, for God's sake. I mean, you have to be a virtuoso
yes,
in the
absolutely.
first place to play it. It's a virtuoso piece.
But so you identify with whatever the composer is, really.
Well, I understand it.
Yeah.
I can change according to the composition. I understand it in my heart and in my spirit. I don't know why, but I have a very easy recognition of that music. There is no problem for me to change myself to fit in. You know, I'm not going to play a Beethoven sonata as I would be playing Carmen Fantasy. Never. And are there such performers? I'm asked, that's a question. Who can't change?
Not many.
Not many. I
Not
mean,
many.
most of us.
Yeah, not many. Not
They
many
have to be
that
idiots.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
You know,
I mean, how can you play Beethoven sonata and sound like Carmen Fantasy?
Well, a lot of artists don't have the culture. You need to have the culture, you know, and you have to understand style.
Or the control, maybe. You're right.
They have to understand style, you know. You
Yes.
cannot approach
So they are not.
every composer the same
Then
way.
that's a lack of culture.
And also, going back to talking about you, you know, for me it's just fascinating to see that you're interested in everything. You love flamenco and you love
Yes, I do.
all kinds of music.
Absolutely.
Even Metallica, because I remember
Yes,
I went to a
yes,
concert
yes.
and you enjoyed it very
Abs-
much.
oh, very
to
much.
my surprise.
Very much. Because everything is art. But you have to interpret it that way. If it's lousy, then I don't appreciate it. But it has, everything you do, in my opinion, has to be first class. If you don't do it first class in that kind of environment or projection, don't do it. Stay away. Do what you can do. I want to dress in a first class way also, so that I wear a pretty dress. I'm not going to appear anywhere not looking properly dressed. Even when I take my doggy for a walk, people say, "Are you going to a party?" When I take my Decca for a walk, I say, "No, I'm going right into the street, but I want to look good
And you do it for you,
for me."
of course.
Precisely.
Of course.
That's it. In my bedroom, I don't wear rags.
So when you are looking at the future generations, you know, and you had a word of advice, what would that advice be?
You know, first of all, I would say that I've been lucky. I met some of the younger generation who, I think not too long ago, we attended a concert with the younger generation, and I was really impressed. I think that some of the teachers now, and this is not a compliment, we have you for the piano, who understand so much how to transfer all of that, how to explain. So I'm very optimistic, not pessimistic. Not too long ago maybe I was, but I think things are looking up. The teachers know a lot more than maybe some generation before. They take a lot of pains to rise to the highest level. They are themselves very educated. So I'm very, very hopeful that it's going to be okay.
I think that also with the development of technology, artists have access, you know, to YouTube, to the media, the way it's presented today. They have much more access to much more information.
Probably.
And they can make their own decisions.
And
I
they
think-
learn.
And I think that they are more assertive than younger generations. They don't pay such reverence to teachers. They really try to develop their own individuality, and they look for their own roads and own ways. And I think that should be encouraged. You know, I went with you to hear David Garrett, a virtuoso violinist that, you know, all his life was trained in classical music. Well, he felt like his heart was not really there, and he went and explored other areas and found what he passionately loves, which is crossing over, to rock. And still, when he presents that kind of music and he takes the violin, it's still quite incredible and,
Yes.
and quite miraculous.
Right. So he was intelligent enough.
He was intelligent enough, because I think that it takes a lot of maturity and soul searching, and I think that if you passionately feel that way, you should follow that road. A lot of people follow that road because they want to make it. So I think that it's very, very important to be as genuine as he was when
But
he made that decision.
I have to make a comment here. Was not with his father's approval. The father
Interesting.
is a very intellectual gentleman. I better not mention the name, maybe somebody will kill me if I mention his name. But very intellectual, and he brought David to me when David was 11 years of age. Beautiful little boy. And he said, I want him to play just like you do. That's my dream and my ambition. But this was not the wish of David. Not that he disapproved of my playing, but this was not his vocation. Let me put it that way. He's extremely good looking. Probably women, all the young ladies were chasing him. And he said, I think I have a different road to take. I can do the crossover and occasionally insert also the classical, but my main drive and my main road is to play what I want, which is pop. And that's what he did. Not with the father's approval.
Well,
No.
good for him, because he found his way.
His niche.
I think that we have to. I'm very sad. I think that that I love to talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and hopefully we will have other projects.
Well, you know what Scarlett O'Hara said in Gone with the Wind?
What did she say?
There is always tomorrow.
There is always tomorrow, and we have
Tomorrow
great plans
never-
for tomorrow.
Never ends.
Exactly.
So on
And
that
I
note-
still am hopeful that we will realize this dream of turning Miami into your world when it comes to the violin, and attract all the violinists of the world down here. So they can share. I mean, I feel so fortunate to share your life and your way of thinking, and I'm not selfish. I want more people to share that with you.
May I add something to that dream? Do you know you're the very first to express that dream? You see, Miami was a very well-known tourist attraction. Everybody wanted to come to Miami. Why? Because there is the ocean and the sunshine. It was for the sand and the water and the sunshine. All of a sudden, you introduced something different here, which I'm hoping, because I like Miami very, very much. I'm very comfortable here, and not many people know why I'm here. May I mention why my presence is in Miami? My father was an artist painter, and he had a friend whose name was Bashevis Singer, Isaac Bashevis Singer, and he wanted to be near this great author's presence. I bought the house because of my father and Isaac Bashevis Singer.
Well, hopefully we'll make that dream come true.
And you are the one to introduce that dream, and I feel that you will achieve it. And I'm ready to be with you whichever way you want.
Thank you, Ita.
Thank you so much.
And we all love you very much.
And I love you. Thank you so much.
you.